Welcome back. Clearly, the list of people hurt in the housing crisis is long, but it's also clear that many people who were hurt themselves. Tonight, Jane Wells with the story of one man and 4 houses. She's live in L.A. Hey, Jane.
Hey, Rebecca. You know, we usually talk about the housing problem from an altitude of 30,000 feet. Here it is on the ground, in your face. Scott Mintz is honest about all that went wrong, but here's the problem. He's not alone. He was one of a whole lot of people who believed what we were being told all the time, that housing prices would keep going up.
My idea is go a second story.
Like many, chiropractor Scott Mintz thought he could get rich in real estate. Now he's facing bankruptcy, and he wants help.
I'm getting probably 40 calls a day from collectors.
Mintz bought 4 homes in L.A. during the boom, fixed them up, and refinanced the heck out of them to draw out cash, believing prices would always rise. Now he's behind and upside down on all 4 loans.
Some taxpayers will look at this and say, look, here's a guy who got in over his head. He got 4 houses. They're all upside down. Why should we help him?
I think, as I said, it helps the whole, possibly.
Can helping him help the whole mess? The mortgage on this house, for example, is $275 grand, but it's worth a third less, rented to a tenant having financial problems and skipping the rent. Mintz says the bank, IndyMac, may modify the loan to interest only for 5 years at a low rate. Then he'd have 20 years to repay the original principal at a variable rate. He says unless the bank reduces the principal to market value, any modification is destined to fail for him and others.
In 5 years, I'll have nothing still. And the value of my house will probably still be less than what I owe on it. I mean, we're just destined for another depression possibly in 5 years. And the same thing again, it's like, you know, we're going to repeat our history.
Do you figure some people are going to say, well, forget it. Let him go. Let those houses go.
It was very difficult, but I had opened my mind to that. I've actually had my mortgage broker call me up and apologize for the loans that he's gotten me.
Mintz says that he is short $10,000 a month on all his mortgages. Now, IndyMac, which services the loan on that rental property we were at, tells us tonight that its modification programs don't apply to investment properties. Quote, it's not about undoing people's bad investment decisions, which leaves Scott Mintz probably facing Chapter 7 and possibly 4 more homes adding to the flood on the foreclosure market. Tyler, I got a whole lot more with Mintz on the blog, funnybusiness.cnbc.com. Back to you.
All right, Jane, thanks very much. Jim Carr is with the National Community Reinvestment Coalition. Carl Horowitz is with the National Legal and Policy Center. And the big question now is, are we in need of a massive wave of foreclosures? Mr. Horowitz, I wonder how you react to what the person in Jane Wells' piece proposed, and that is, why not just take his, redo his loan at a principal that reflects the current value of the house?
Well, there's a lot of borrowers like him, and if you multiply that enough, you're going to get what amounts to nationalization of a large portion of the owner-occupied housing
Explain
stock.
that. Explain how that works. Wouldn't that just be a deal between the lender and the borrower?
Well,
why is that
the problem is there might not be enough buyers around. We have an ample housing stock in this country. We have about 4 million homes for sale, and about 3 million of them are vacant. The housing is there, and any number of these homes, you know, at least in the short run, could be converted to rentals. I mean, maybe you're not going to get the best quality tenants, but it is a source of generating income and paying off the loans. I can't help but feel sorry for this gentleman, but you know, there were warnings for years, especially around 2004, 2005, about a huge housing bubble. Well, the bubble has popped, and anybody could have predicted this. We were way overloaded in real estate, and now, unfortunately, the last guy's holding.
So the system should just eat the foreclosures, in your view?
I'm sorry, it's very unfortunate, but it's the best thing to do.
Mr. Carr, I suspect you disagree.
Well, first of all, let's go to the example of the gentleman you showed. Well, he probably doesn't deserve to get help. But the reality of it is this foreclosure crisis in 2008 affected 2.3 million households, and their stories are not like that gentleman's. He's an outlier in this whole predicament. 1.5 million households were affected in 2007. Again, they vary significantly from that example. And in fact, he made a good example because it's so outrageous. But most households are not in that circumstance. Most households got hold of a product that should never have been offered. And the reality of it is that we have now been seeing through 2007 and 2008 the housing market trying to do exactly what Dr. Horowitz has proposed, which is to work itself out, and it hasn't done it. And as of 2008, we began bailing out financial institutions one at a time. By the fall of last year, we were bailing out the entire financial system. The fact of the matter is that we are past the conversation on do we want to do it, and the reality is that we have to address this foreclosure crisis because the estimates now range from 8 to 10 million more over the next 4 years, and that's simply going to produce trillions more bad assets for the financial institutions that we're ultimately going to come behind them and have to bail them out even further.
It's going to, it's also going to, it's also going to enable more of the same. I mean, the very bad habits that led to this crisis are going to be reinforced. Lenders and borrowers alike were going to have this attitude, well, you know, the federal government bailed us out in 2009, well, let's get going again.
And that's
Let's
okay,
another
Mr. Carr.
crisis.
Right. I agree that if you don't pass laws to eliminate the reckless lending that took place, then you could have the same thing happen again. So I completely agree. But the fact of the matter is that we knew exactly what kind of loan products shouldn't have been offered. They were risky subprime loans. You can identify them. There's a whole class of Alt-A pay option arms that are still in the system. They don't begin to peak reset until 2010 and 2011. So there's a lot more pain built into the system. And we already see, looking at the damage of the financial system, it cannot handle itself. We've already got the federal government offering $7.2 trillion worth of investment and loans, and still that's insufficient.
Well,
let me throw out a little political reality here. You know, I think that the train has kind of left the station on this discussion. There's no question that the Obama administration and Congress are going to move with more aggressive efforts to prevent foreclosures. I mean, that's the political reality of the moment. So, you know, whether anyone agrees with folks like this gentleman who had 4 houses being the beneficiary of that or not, the fact is there's going to be a greater effort coming out of Washington on that.
It's true that this gentleman is an extreme example, but there's a lot of people out there who got loans who frankly shouldn't have. And this situation really was pushed. It has its origins back in the 90s when Clinton first and then Bush this decade. They were absolutely obsessed with boosting the national homeownership rate. It was about 64, 65%.
Let me just jump in right there. In fact, between 1998 and 2006, only less than 10% of subprime problematic loans, the loans that are the core of this foreclosure crisis, were for first-time homeownership. So that's just not true. The subprime crisis was largely a crisis of housing refinancing in which people were doing exactly the problem of getting in, refinancing a home, refinancing again, and being encouraged to do so by financial institutions. And it's important to recognize for every failing mortgage, there's both a borrower and a financial institution that did the wrong thing.
They're playing our song again, gentlemen. That means that one thing and one thing only. Mr. Horowitz, thank you very much. That was great. Mr. Carr, good to have you with us. It was a very good discussion.